Okay, so against my better judgment, I'm going to record this tutorial. This is kind of jumping the gun a little bit. Certainly later in the semester this will make sense. But I had a student asking about, how would I do this for my model? And the tutorial I did before this was how to use kind of three-dimensional noise, how to use the dilate and erode smoothing within the volume structure, and then using fields to kind of dent the surface. But how would I change the shading based on some of these surface properties, I think was the question, right? So I will say as I go along, hopefully in trying to do this tutorial, because I'm doing a screen capture at the same time I'm trying to use the Redshift IPR, I've had a couple crashes here. So I've switched it so I have my rendering in Cinema using an external eGPU box, and then the screen capture software should be using the graphics card in the iMac. So hopefully I won't have any crashes, but we will see. So a caveat to this is, as you're trying to do some of these things, I would save very often and frequently as you go through some of this if you're trying to follow along. Okay, so what are we going to do? So I've already created this scene that has this volume object, right? It has these dents in here, but I want to try to shade it and add a material to it. It's a little more complex, which is difficult because we haven't really talked that much about materials yet up until this point, but let's see what happens, right? All right, so let me stop this, and I'm going to double click on, I already created a material. This was a material, node material, and I made sure that Redshift was my default engine, so it created a node material that Redshift knew what to do with. There's also a window. Instead of this floating here, I'm going to dock it, right? So any of these things you can undock, and if I right-click, I can undock that and do something with it, right? Take it elsewhere. This one actually is a floating window, and I'm going to take it and put it right here. I don't want it, I don't know if you can see how this is highlighting. I don't want it locked in between here and here. I want it right there, kind of next to my 3D perspective window, right? So it's kind of a two-window viewport. So I have these two, and then I have that. Okay, let's see how this works. I do have the material, and we have talked a little bit in class about how we modify this, and then the output, we actually confronted this at the very beginning, like when you created a material, and if you click on it over here, it loads the output that has its surface, displacement, volume, blah, blah, blah. We're only using the surface, and underneath here are all these instructions, and those instructions are from that thing, right? So these nodes are like the little prepackaged containers, right? This one does some stuff and then passes it on to the output, right? But there are a lot of little nodes that do big operations and tiny little operations, and there's one that we're going to mess with here just a little bit. If I click on the add node in this view, the node editor, I can click on these, right? There's a whole bunch of them, little math operations and little utilities and things. The one actually that we want is this curvature here, but we can also, excuse me, I can just create the curve right like this. Right? So the curve utility is like a mathematical texture, right? It's not like an image that I just wrap on top of the surface. It's something gets calculated based on the surface details. And in this case, whether or not the surface is convex or not, right? Is it flat? Convex would be sticking out, right? So these edges based on the surface would be sticking out, right? Between here and here. This stuff would just be flat, other than, of course, these little dents would be concave. It's its own thing we could talk about later, but I'm just going to leave this convex because I want to just do something that's going to highlight the edges, right? So this curvature is a mathematical image that gets applied to the material, which gets applied to the surface, right? So we have looked at the idea that here's the diffuse color, right? I can make something more or less diffuse. If I turn this to 0, I get a black object, and of course, because the reflectivity is all the way up here, I get the reflection. I can also make the reflection blurry, right? I can turn these things. So we've talked a little bit about, right? The weight is the amount of this thing, and the color is, what kind of color properties are embedded within that, the surface itself. So what if we take the curvature and put it into, if we just put this into the color itself, like what does that look like? So let's just put that in there. Right? So right now you're like, well, it made it black, but keep in mind this is something that really has to be calculated at render time. So it's not going to give us a clear update of this. So we need to, in the just general viewport, so we need to turn on the IPR to get this rendering. Oops, and what did I do here? Oh, I turned the weight all the way down. There we go. Sorry. So with a weight of 1 in the diffuse color, it says the color on the surface is going to be black and white or gray, depending on how convex it is. And you can see this example, like these are very convex, so that looks white. This is not convex at all, so it's black. And you can see on these bolts that are here, it's actually gray. So this is, it's giving me, kind of a half result in there. So already this is kind of interesting, right? It makes that surface a little more special. I'm going to turn that off. As we go along, I'm just going to be saving like crazy just in case this wants to crash. Okay, so that would be the weight, or the color itself. Actually, I'm going to pull that out of there. I could also put this on the weight. And now I don't see the weight inside of here, but if I just drag the out up on top of this, I get all these properties that I can make connections to. So if I go over to the diffuse channel, which is like we see diffuse over here. So within diffuse, we see there was the color we did a second ago, but there's also the weight, right? So this is the amount that it's allowed to be. And we're going to get a very similar result, but it's still going to look a little different, right? Just based on what it's modifying in there. But this already looks nice, right? It looks like it's adding to that surface. There's so many things. I almost like, oh, well, we can get the ramp node out, or we can do this. I'm like, wait a minute, I should slow down and not too much stuff. But already this is kind of nice, but so it changes the edges, but of course it made the surface black. So maybe this is not what we want. So let's turn this off. File save. And I'm going to pull this out of here. So what if we could control, what if I wanted this surface to be, I don't know, kind of orangey. Ooh, like, let's make it a little more yellow. What if we made this more like caterpillar yellow, right? It needs maybe just a little smidge more orange. Right, the Caterpillar, the machine company, right? Let's do that. Okay, so what if we decided we want this material to be like that, but on the edges, we don't actually want it to be, we don't want it to have that yellow paint. In fact, we just want it to look like reflective metal that's on the side of that. So really what we need is two materials. We need one material that's like this yellow paint, and it probably shouldn't be that reflective, and it should also be kind of rough, right? So it shouldn't be as, maybe not, turn up the reflection a little bit. Right, so it's maybe a little less rough than that. Right, so maybe like that, that's maybe something like that's gonna work. So this is like the paint part of it. But what if I also want it to show up with something that is not yellow? And I can tell my machine's being a little sluggish because of the screen capture trying to do its thing. Actually, I don't want hardly any diffuse on top there. I just want a whole bunch of reflection. In fact, I want this to look very metallic. So down in the reflection properties under the incidence or refraction, I'm going to turn this up to a little over 2. And I should get something that's a little more chromy, right? All right, so I could put this into the surface, right? And I would get something that looks very metallic, but then I get this one that's yellow, but how do I get it so that I get metal in just these edges and where this convex stuff is happening, and leave the yellow where it is? Well, we're going to use the curvature, that black and white image we had looked at, right, as a way to, as a mask, to say, you know what, show this material in certain places and show that material in certain places. And we do this with a blend node. So there's several different types of blends. We can blend textures or colors, and we can also blend materials, right? We can blend bump materials and displacement, but this one we want just the material itself. So if I click on it, you can see over here in the attribute editor, we have the base material and then whatever colors we put on top of it. Well, the base material that we want, I'm just going to drag this little import over and then let go of the mouse, and I'm moving my mouse over base color and click on color. And then I'm going to tell this to go into the surface, right? So this goes here, it goes into the blender, and then out into the output. So at this point, it won't look any different. And then we're going to take this material and we're going to say, you know what? Oops, sometimes this little interface, I'm going to hit escape. So I'll take this over and highlight. There we go. Sometimes just the way it wants to click through there. So I just drag and drop it up here. And this time we already have the base material set to this yellow. This one we want to go into the material color for layer number 1. Right? So this is in there. And there's still, let's see. So if I click on this, this is the base material. And then I have the material color for this one is set here. And the color that blends it is black. And black means 0, means nothing. And if I make this white, let's just go ahead and, oops, in fact, you know what, let's make this black, so we do it first. All right, so if I go over to the IPR, you can see there's just yellow, right? Looks like cheese almost. I'm kind of liking it. In fact, I might end up making this just a little more reflective and a little less blurry. Okay. So there's that one. Now let's go over here to the blend for that color, and let's say, hey, let's make it white. And then let's look at that in the IPR, and you'll see I get all the metal out of that. And if I click on it again and I make this say 50% gray or close to some kind of middle gray, it's starting to blend between those, so it's not as bright yellow as it was a second ago. Let's see if I can turn that down. And it's not showing as much just because of the metal feature. If I made this a color, you would see them kind of blending together, but I'm just going to leave this at black for now. All right, let me just say save, just in case it wants to throw up. Okay. I'm going to turn off that render back and forth as much as I can so that the screen capture software doesn't have a hard time. Okay, so let's take this curvature. So if that blend color, we're just setting it this way. So instead of just setting either black or gray or white, what if I said, let's make it some range of value depending on how much convexness it has. So we'll put this into the blend color. And so that we can see this, actually, I'm going to make the diffuse, let's make it, I don't know, blue. And I'm going to turn the weight for the diffuse up a little bit. Right, so it's this kind of blue. Just so we can see this a little bit better, and I'll fire that off. And you should be able to see some of that now is coming through, where these edges are now highlighted, right? So part of it is just the metallic quality. It also has a little bit of that blue in there. I might even just leave that. That's kind of nice. But without that, it was just all yellow. But now we have this, so this edge has been exposed, right? It's been, it's like it's worn out a little bit across that surface. Let me turn this redshift off for a second. with this curvature, to get a sense of how this is working, we already put it into the base color, but you can also just say, ignore all the material properties and just show me what this thing outputs on the surface. Right? So even though this kind of looked like when we put it into the material color or the diffuse weight or something, all this is saying, don't show me the reflections or anything, just show me the object with whatever this thing is or collection of things going into the surface itself. So I'll go over to the curvature node. One thing I can do is, so there's all kinds of different things I can change about how this gets calculated, right? And one thing, this will be pretty obvious to everyone, is if I can change the contrast, right? So I can make more of that show up. So let's put this, and to get rid of that, we're just gonna put this one in here. Right, so now you can see the edges of that are showing through a lot more. In fact, instead of using that IPR, because I think that's what's causing me all the grief here. Let's just do individual renders. Right, so you can see my kind of block of cheese. Right, but this is kind of nice, right? This looks kind of worn out a little bit on these, like they've been just, it's just got wear and tear on it. There's so many different things I could do with, let's try 2, I think. Let me save this. I'll do another one. Right, so it's got a little more wear. It's just the radius of that calculation is getting spread out a little bit, so it's a little softer on that edge. We'll do a little comparison here in a second. Right, so this is the first one that was kind of tight. This one a little more, kind of a broader radius. I'm going to turn that down. And there's just so much we can do with how we control the contrast on that surface and how much of the effect we get. So there's almost like levels adjustments, right, that I'm making across that surface. All right, so not bad. The one problem, and I'll just try to do this quickly, this tutorial's getting long. So the last piece of this is, it's doing a nice job, but it's pretty uniform, right? It's happening along every single edge the whole entire time. So what we need to do is mask the mask. So let's save that one and put it off to the side. All right, so we've done the curvature, and we use that to blend these materials, but what if we just want to blend a couple textures together and then use that as the blend color? And that's what we're going to do. So the first thing is what we need is some noise. So I'm going to use the max on noise because it's awesome, right? And so we can see it. I'm going to take that noise and put it into the surface. Let's do a save just in case I get a crash. And we'll start a little IPR. So this is what I'm getting across that surface. It's just a noise, and there's all different types of noise I could try. This one, I think just in the interest of time, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to increase the contrast for it. And let's see what we get. Increase the contrast a little bit, and I'm going to turn that scale down just a little bit more. All right, perfect, right? So what I want to do is almost like a mask, like a multiply layer in Photoshop. What I want to say is anywhere there's some black pixels on this one, I want to multiply that over the top of this one, which will eliminate the white, which is only showing up in the edges. And to blend these together, we don't use a material blender. We use a layer. right? So you can put so many different layers in here, right? But I'm just going to put this into the base color, and we're going to put this one into the layer 1 color. Let's actually make this little change here. Create a little space for myself, right? And so if this is, keep in mind, so the curvature is the one that's the base, and then we're going to put this blobby thing over the top of it as a mask. In the blend mode, I'm just going to make multiply. So it's going to take the dark pixels from this one and multiply it over the top, and then I'll take the result of that, and I'm going to put that into the blend color. And in Cinema, if you, or in the node editor here, you can either minimize, show that everything that's available is the default, and then just show whatever it is that you're using, right, in these kind of sections. So I get the curvature result along with this noise. I put them together. I do some Photoshop operations. I use that as a mask or a blend color to say, you know what, show me this material on those edges where it hasn't been masked off by this one, and then for the rest of it, just put this yellow paint on top of it, and then feed that into my materials and put that onto the output. Ta-da! And let's go back to our window. And let's see what we get. Right, so I would spend a lot of time working on this. It's not quite where I want it to be, but at least it's broken up. This is really nice right here, right? So it looks like this exposed edge has quite a bit on it. It's got some little spots here. There's some things we could do to try to, make these edges a little bit bigger and show where the wear and tear is and kind of change that. But this is not bad, right? There's some other things we could use with curvature to make it actually look like there's dirt down inside these little dimples and that, but that's maybe for another tutorial as well. Okay, 22 minutes, oh my God. Let's see where we started. Yeah, that's not bad, right? So that's where we were at. And then we got to this one, right? We're just on a few of those edges, but these little things make it feel a little more natural. Not perfect yet, but it's a good start, and at least it doesn't look pristine and clean. All right? Hey, that little method worked pretty good. I didn't have any crashes by separating my graphics cards. Note to self for later. All right, happy animating and modeling.